Carlos Alcaraz's dominance over the last few years has been utterly remarkable. He has become the youngest player in history to win Roland Garros and Wimbledon Grand Slams back-to-back. Alcaraz's rise to success highlights a stark contrast with his seasoned competitors who, despite their lengthy careers, have yet to achieve even a fraction of his achievements. And this got me thinking, does he possess an advantage that no one is talking about? I'm not referring to a talent edge or anything nefarious, I'm talking about his genetics. Not just his specific traits like speed, power, and strength potential, but more about his stature. This led me to a question. What is the most ideal physique for a tennis player? In sports like basketball, there's a clear advantage to being taller. However, at some point this becomes a detriment. Otherwise, every 7'5" player would be in the greatest of all time conversation. If you're too short, say 5'3" for example, you simply won't be able to compete. The same case could be made for tennis players. In 2006, there was a certain individual tearing up the college tennis circuit. This player was unlike anything we've ever seen. Tennis historically has been reserved for the shorter and more nimble players. Laver was seen as one of the early greats, yet he stood only 5'9". Michael Chang, the youngest male to win a Grand Slam, stood at the same height. Fast forward a few decades, we have this absolute behemoth of a man coming out of the United States of America. Picture this. Your name's Diego Schwartzman and you're standing on the tennis court waiting to return a serve. Across the net stands your opponent and you realize something. The best hope I have here is to win in a tiebreak. In 2007, John Isner joined the pro circuit and quickly made a name for himself. John Isner was the first in line of many who followed that were rightly named the serve bots. Standing 6 foot 10 inches, you could say this was very unique in the world of tennis. John Isner won a total of 24 titles throughout his career and holds the #1 spot for total aces served. Yet despite his achievements, John was never able to win a Grand Slam, and throughout his career only made it to one Grand Slam semi-final. This is what the heights of the top 100 players looked like when John Isner joined the ATP Tour. 70% of the players range between 5'11" and 6'3". Fast forward 15 years and the chart begins to look a little different. Now 70% of the players range between 6'1" and 6'5". So clearly there has been a change over the last 20 years. Tennis is getting taller, and not only that, the taller players are getting better. But if we look deeper, the players who are dominating the competition are not. Let's take a look at the height chart again. Now let's remove all the players who have not won Grand Slams. The picture becomes a little clearer. But dominance is not defined by one Grand Slam. If we remove the players who have only won a single slam, we start to see a clear trend. It's to no surprise that the big three make up a giant bulk of these numbers. Throughout their careers, Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, and Rafael Nadal combined for 103 ATP Masters 1000 titles, 62 ATP 500 titles, 13 ATP Finals titles, no thanks to Rafa, and a whopping 66 Grand Slams. They almost combined for more in each of the categories than every other player on the planet. Nadal and Federer both stood 6'1" and 85 kilograms, where Djokovic stood 6'2", 77 kilograms. For being the three greatest of all time, it appears they have something in common that contributed to these metrics. Recently, we've seen the rise of Carlos Alcaraz, who seems to possess an ideal blend of these attributes. Standing at around 6 feet tall, Alcaraz combines the agility and speed of a shorter player with the power and reach of a taller player. His physique might just represent the best of both worlds, potentially setting a new standard in tennis. In 2022, Carlos Alcaraz won the US Open title and staked his claim as the best player in the world by taking the #1 ranking. The only players who seem to contend with Alcaraz is Djokovic and Jannik Sinner, who both have a height-to-weight ratio of 0.96. So where does the wonder boy Carlos Alcaraz stack up? Carlos Alcaraz sits around 6 feet tall and 74 kilograms, with an inches to kilograms height-to-weight ratio of 1.01. He is like a mini Djokovic in terms of height to weight ratio, but possesses the skill set of the entire big three. Clearly in tennis, it's problematic to be too short. Unlike other contact sports such as football or those that demand vertical prowess like basketball, tennis has a unique simplicity at its core. The primary requirement, simply getting the ball over the net. If your stature is on the shorter side, holding your service games becomes much more challenging. Conversely, if you're exceptionally tall, breaking your opponent's service game is no easy feat. Despite the trend of tennis players getting taller, the characteristics of those who ultimately triumph remain largely unchanged. I believe this is why we have not seen taller players come to dominate consistently over shorter players. Taking all this into account and considering the historic dominance of the big three, Carlos Alcaraz stands out with the best tennis physique we've ever seen. His blend of attributes mirrors the greats, setting a new standard in sport.